Eric Cantona scored 82 goals for Manchester United, but the most important moment wasn't a goal. It was January 25th, 1995 at Selhurst Park, when he jumped into the crowd and kicked a Crystal Palace fan. This is the story of how a difficult boy from Marseille became King Eric. Eric Daniel Pierre Cantona was born on May 24th, 1966 in Marseille, France. His father Albert worked as a psychiatric nurse in the local hospital. His mother Eleanor was a dressmaker who worked from home. They lived in a small two-bedroom apartment in the Caillols district, a working-class neighbourhood in the eastern part of the city. Caillols was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. The streets were narrow, the buildings were old, there were no parks, no green spaces, just concrete and apartment blocks. But there was one thing everyone had in common: football. Every boy in Caillols played football, in the streets, in the courtyards, against the walls. Football was everything. Eric was the youngest of three brothers. His older brothers, Jean-Marie and Joel, both played football. Jean-Marie was the best. He played for the local youth team. He was fast, technical. Everyone said he would be a professional, but it was Eric who had something different, something harder to define. He was more aggressive, more determined, more arrogant. Even as a child, Eric was difficult. He didn't like being told what to do. He argued with teachers at school. He fought with other boys in the neighbourhood. When he played football, he refused to pass the ball. He wanted to score every goal himself. When he didn't score, he got angry. He shouted at his teammates. He blamed the referee. He kicked the ball against the wall until his parents called him inside. At the age of 10, Eric joined Caillols, the local youth club. The coach was a man named Henri. Henri had coached hundreds of boys over the years. He knew talent when he saw it, and he saw it in Eric. But he also saw a problem. Eric was talented, but he was impossible to control. In one game, Eric scored 4 goals. His team won 6-0. After the game, Henry told Eric he played well, but Eric wasn't satisfied. He said he should have scored 6 goals, that his teammates were too slow, that they didn't give him the ball enough. Henri told him to calm down. Eric said Henri didn't understand football. He was 10 years old. By the time Eric was 12, every coach in Marseille knew about him. He was the best player in his age group, but nobody wanted to coach him. He argued with everyone. He refused to follow tactics. He walked off the pitch when things didn't go his way. One coach told Eric's father that Eric would never play professional football, not because he wasn't good enough, because he was too difficult, but Eric's father believed in him. He knew Eric was different. He knew Eric had something special. So in 1980, when Eric was 14 years old, his father made a decision. He would send Eric away, not to another club in Marseille, but to Auxerre, a small town 300 miles north of Marseille, to the youth academy run by Giroud. Giroud was famous in France. He had been the manager of Auxerre since 1961. He had built the club from nothing. He had created one of the best youth academies in the country. He was known for taking difficult boys and turning them into professional players, not by breaking them, but by understanding them. Eric arrived at Auxerre in the summer of 1980. He was 14 years old. He had never been away from home before. He lived in a dormitory with 15 other boys. They shared a bathroom. They ate together. They trained together. 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. The training was hard. Roux didn't believe in rest. He believed in discipline, in repetition, in control. Eric hated it at first. He wanted to play games. He wanted to score goals. But Roux made him do drills, passing drills, control drills, movement drills, over and over again, for hours. But Roux also did something different. He talked to Eric, not like a coach, like a father. He told Eric that talent was not enough, that there were thousands of talented boys in France, but only a few became professionals. The difference was not talent, it was control. Control of the ball, control of your emotions, control of yourself. Eric listened. He didn't always agree, but he listened. He trained harder. He stopped arguing. He focused. By the age of 16, he was playing for the Auxerre reserve team. By 17, he was training with the first team. On November 5th, 1983, Eric made his professional debut for Auxerre. He was 17 years old. The game was against Nancy. Auxerre won 2-1. Eric played the last 15 minutes. He didn't score, but he played well. Roux was proud. Eric's father came to watch. He cried when Eric came on. Eric stayed at Auxerre for 5 years. Between 1983 and 1988, he made 78 appearances for the first team. He scored 23 goals. It was a decent record, but not spectacular. He was good, but not great. He played as a striker, sometimes as an attacking midfielder. He was strong, technical, good in the air, but he was still difficult. Coaches didn't always trust him. They said he was lazy, that he didn't track back, that he only cared about scoring goals. Fans appreciated his talent, but they didn't love him. Not the way they loved other players. There was something about Eric that kept people at a distance. He was arrogant, aloof. He acted like he was better than everyone else. In the summer of 1988, Auxerre decided to sell him. They received an offer from Martigues, a second division club in the south of France. The fee was small, around 300,000 francs. Eric was 22 years old. He had played professional football for 5 years, and now he was going backwards, from the first division to the second division, from a good club to a small club. Eric hated Martigues. The town was tiny, the stadium held 5,000 people, the training ground was a muddy field, the dressing room was cold. The other players were not professionals, they had jobs during the week, they played football on weekends. Eric felt like he was wasting his time. He stayed for 1 season. He played 18 games. He scored 6 goals. Martigues finished 9th in the second division. It was nowhere near good enough. Eric knew he had to leave. He needed to go somewhere bigger, somewhere that matched his ambition. So when Olympique de Marseille called him in the summer of 1989, he said yes immediately. Marseille were the biggest club in France. They played in the old Stade Vélodrome. 50,000 people every week. They had money. They had history. They had ambition. This was Eric's dream, to play for his hometown club, to play in front of his family, to play in front of the people who had known him since he was a child. But it didn't work out. The manager was Gerard Guilly. Guilly didn't rate Eric. He thought Eric was lazy, that he didn't work hard enough, that he didn't fit the system. Eric played 10 games for Marseille. He scored 0 goals. After 3 months, Guilly told him he wasn't good enough. Eric was devastated. In December 1989, Marseille loaned him to Bordeaux. Bordeaux were a mid-table club, not as big as Marseille, but bigger than Martigues. The manager was Aimé Jacquet. Jacquet would later become the coach of the French national team. He saw something in Eric. He gave him a chance. Eric played 15 games for Bordeaux. He scored 6 goals. It was his best form in years. He felt appreciated. He felt understood. But at the end of the season, Bordeaux didn't have the money to sign him permanently. Eric returned to Marseille. Gilly told him again that he had no future there. Eric was 23 years old. He had played for 4 clubs in 5 years. He was starting to believe that maybe everyone was right. Maybe he wasn't good enough. Then Montpellier called. Montpellier were a mid-table first division club. Not fashionable, not rich, but stable. The manager was Michel Mézy. Mézy had heard about Eric. He knew Eric was difficult, but he also knew Eric was talented. He offered Eric a contract. Eric signed in July 1990. This was his 5th club in 6 years. At Montpellier, something changed. Mézy was different from every other coach Eric had worked with. He didn't shout, he didn't criticise, he didn't try to control Eric. He just let him play. He told Eric to do what he felt was right, to express himself, to be creative, to be himself. For the first time in his career, Eric was happy. He played 33 games for Montpellier in the 1990-91 season. He scored 10 goals. Montpellier finished 5th in the league. Eric was named in the team of the season. People started to notice him. Newspapers wrote about him. Scouts came to watch him. Eric thought he had finally found his place. But then, in January 1991, he did something that changed everything. It was January 12th, 1991. Montpellier were playing away at Saint-Étienne. The game was tight, physical. Montpellier were losing 2-1. There were 10 minutes left. Eric was frustrated. Nothing was working. His teammates weren't passing to him. The referee was giving every decision to Saint-Étienne. Then, in the 85th minute, Eric made a run into the box. A defender pulled his shirt. Eric went down. He looked at the referee. He expected a penalty. The referee waved play on. No penalty. Eric got up. He walked toward the referee. He shouted at him. The referee told him to calm down. Eric didn't calm down. He picked up the ball. and he threw it at the referee's face, hard. The referee fell backwards. He clutched his face. The stadium went silent. Eric's teammates stood still. They couldn't believe what they had just seen. The referee got up. He reached into his pocket. Red card. Eric didn't argue. He walked off the pitch, but he wasn't finished. As he walked down the tunnel, he saw the Montpellier president sitting in the stands. The president was talking to a journalist. Eric stopped. He walked up to the president. He pointed his finger at him. He shouted. He said Montpellier was a small club, that the league was corrupt, that French football was dead, that he didn't want to play in France anymore. Then he ripped off his Montpellier shirt. He threw it on the ground. He walked into the dressing room. The president was furious. He told the media that Eric was finished at Montpellier, that he would never play for the club again. The French Football Federation opened an investigation. 2 weeks later, they banned Eric for 1 month. Montpellier fined him 2 weeks' wages. The media called him a disgrace, a thug, a danger to the game. Coaches from other clubs were asked if they would sign Eric. They all said no. They said Eric was too difficult, too unpredictable, too dangerous. Eric was 24 years old. He had played for 5 clubs in 7 years, and now, it seemed, his career was over. Eric spent the next few weeks at home in Marseille. He didn't train, he didn't watch football, he just sat in his apartment. He thought about quitting, about doing something else, about leaving football behind. Marseille didn't want him, but Nîmes Olympique did. Eric signed for Nîmes in late 1991. He played a handful of games. Then, in December 1991, the French Football Federation extended his ban. They suspended him for 1 month from all French football. Eric was finished in France. But then his phone rang. It was Michel Platini. Michel Platini was the greatest French player of all time. He had won 3 Ballon d'Ors. He had played for Juventus, for the French national team. Everyone in France knew who Platini was, and now Platini was calling Eric. Platini was working as an advisor to the French Football Federation. He had heard about Eric's ban. He had watched Eric play. He thought Eric was talented. He also thought Eric was wasting his career in France. He told Eric that he needed to leave France, to start fresh, to go somewhere where people didn't know him, where people would judge him on his football, not on his reputation. Platini had a contact in England, at Sheffield Wednesday. He arranged a trial. Eric went to England in February 1991. He trained with Sheffield Wednesday for 2 weeks. He played in a reserve game. He played well, but the manager, Trevor Francis, decided not to sign him. He said Eric didn't fit the English style, that he was too slow, too technical, that he wouldn't survive in the English league. Eric returned to France. He thought that was the end. But then, a few months later, another English club called, Leeds United. The manager was Howard Wilkinson. Wilkinson had heard about Eric from a French scout. He was interested. In January 1992, Leeds offered Eric a trial. Eric said yes. He had nothing to lose. Eric arrived in Leeds on a cold winter morning. He didn't speak English. He had never been to Yorkshire before. He had never seen anything like it. The city was grey. The streets were narrow. The people spoke with an accent he couldn't understand. It was nothing like Marseille. Howard Wilkinson was a disciplinarian. He believed in hard work, in discipline, in organisation. He told Eric the rules were simple. Train hard, play hard, do what you're told, no arguments, no theatrics. If you don't like it, you can leave. Eric nodded. He understood. Eric's first training session was on January 30th, 1992. The Leeds players didn't know who he was. They had heard he was French, that he had been banned, that he had thrown a ball at a referee. They were sceptical. But when Eric started playing, they changed their minds. He was different. He controlled the ball like it was attached to his foot. He made passes they didn't see. He turned defenders with one touch. They were impressed. Eric made his debut for Leeds on February 8th, 1992. The game was at home against Oldham Athletic. Eric wore the number 12 shirt. He played in attack. He didn't score, but he played well. He flicked the ball. He held it up. He brought his teammates into the game. The crowd loved him. They had never seen anyone play like that. After the game, Wilkinson told the press that Eric was different, that he had something special. Leeds won 3-0. Eric played 70 minutes. Wilkinson was impressed. The next day he told the Leeds board that they should sign Eric permanently. The fee was £1 million. Leeds agreed. On February 14th, 1992, Eric Cantona became a Leeds United player. Eric was 25 years old. He had been at 6 clubs in 8 years. Nobody had wanted him. Nobody had believed in him. Now he was at his 7th club, in a country he didn't know, in a league he had never played in, speaking a language he didn't understand. But for the first time in years, Eric felt like he belonged. Eric played his first full 90 minutes for Leeds on February 15th, 1992. The game was away at Luton Town. Leeds won 2-0. Eric didn't score, but he was involved in everything. He dropped deep. He linked the play. He made the team play differently, more patiently, more creatively. The Leeds players started to understand him. They started to trust him. Eric played the last 15 games of the season for Leeds. He scored 3 goals. It wasn't a lot, but his impact was bigger than goals. He made the team better. Gary McAllister, the Leeds captain, said Eric changed everything. That before Eric, Leeds were a hard-working team. After Eric, they were a team that could play football. Leeds were in a title race with Manchester United. United had not won the league since 1967. They were desperate. They had the best squad, the best manager, the most money. Everyone expected them to win. But Leeds refused to give up. It came down to the final game of the season, April 26, 1992. Leeds played away at Sheffield United. United played away at Liverpool. If Leeds won, they would be champions. If they drew or lost, United would win the title. The pressure was enormous. Eric started on the bench. Wilkinson wanted fresh legs for the second half. Leeds started nervously. They couldn't create chances. By half-time, they were losing 1-0. In the dressing room, Wilkinson told them to stay calm, to trust themselves, to believe. In the 65th minute, Wilkinson made a substitution. He brought on Eric. The crowd at Bramall Lane knew this was the moment. Eric jogged onto the pitch. He didn't look nervous. He looked calm, confident, like he had been there 1,000 times before. Eric didn't score, but he changed the game. He dropped deep. He collected the ball, he turned, he passed, he created space. In the 72nd minute, Leeds equalised. Lee Chapman scored from close range. 2 minutes later, Leeds scored again. Gordon Strachan, 2-1. The crowd erupted. Then, in the 86th minute, Leeds scored a third. Eric laid the ball off to Carl Schutt. Schutt scored, 3-2. The final whistle blew. Leeds United were champions of England. Eric fell to his knees. He had been at Leeds for 4 months. He had played 15 games, and now he was a champion. For the first time in his career, he had won a major trophy. The Leeds fans ran onto the pitch. They surrounded the players. They chanted Eric's name, Eric the King, Eric the King. Eric didn't understand the words, but he understood the emotion. He smiled. He waved. He felt something he had never felt before. Acceptance. The next season started in August 1992. Leeds were the defending champions. Eric was the hero. Everyone expected Leeds to dominate. They started the season well. They won their first 3 games. Eric scored in 2 of them. He was playing the best football of his career. But behind the scenes, something was wrong. Eric was unhappy. He argued with Wilkinson. He said the training was boring, that the tactics were too defensive, that Leeds were not ambitious enough. Wilkinson told Eric to focus on football. Eric said Wilkinson didn't understand him. The same old pattern was repeating. In November 1992, Manchester United made an approach. United had lost the title to Leeds. Alex Ferguson, the United manager, was devastated. He knew his team needed something, not just talent, but arrogance, confidence, a player who believed they were the best. He watched Leeds play. He watched Eric, and he knew Eric was the answer. Ferguson called the Leeds chairman. He asked if Eric was for sale. The chairman said no. Ferguson asked again. He offered £1.2 million. It was a small fee, but Leeds accepted. They told Ferguson that Eric was too difficult, that he was causing problems in the dressing room, that they wanted him gone. On November 26, 1992, Manchester United announced the signing of Eric Cantona. The fee was £1.2 million. Eric signed a 4-year contract. He was given the number 7 shirt. The Leeds fans felt betrayed. They had loved Eric. They had called him King. They had sung his name. And now he was gone. To Manchester United, to their biggest rival, to the club they hated more than any other. They burned Eric's shirt outside Elland Road. They called him Judas. They said he had sold them out for money, but Eric didn't see it that way. He saw it as progress. Leeds were small, Manchester United were big. Leeds were cautious, United were ambitious. Leeds were provincial, United were global. Eric wanted to play for the biggest club. He wanted to win the biggest trophies. He wanted to be the best, and United gave him that chance. Eric made his Manchester United debut on December 6th, 1992. The game was the Manchester Derby, United against Manchester City at Old Trafford. 75,000 people in the crowd. Eric wore the number 7 shirt, the number worn by George Best, by Brian Robson, by legends. Eric played in midfield. He controlled the tempo. He made passes. He created chances. United won 2-1. Eric didn't score, but he was everywhere, calm, composed, in control. After the game, Alex Ferguson told the media that Eric was exactly what United needed, that he was a special player. United finished the season as champions. It was their first league title in 26 years. Eric played 22 games. He scored 9 goals, but more importantly, he changed the culture of the club. Before Eric, United were talented but fragile. They collapsed under pressure. After Eric, they were ruthless, confident, arrogant. They believed they were the best, and they were. The next season was even better. 1993-94. United won the league. They won the FA Cup, the double. Eric played 47 games. He scored 18 goals. He was the best player in England. The fans worshipped him. They made banners with his face. They sang songs about him. They wore shirts with his name on the back. Eric loved Old Trafford. He loved the size of it, the noise, the expectation. He played with his collar turned up. He stood with his chest out. He looked at defenders like they were beneath him. When he scored, he didn't celebrate. He just stood there, arms folded, staring at the crowd like he knew it was going to happen. The other players loved him. They said he made them better, that he demanded excellence, that he didn't accept excuses. Roy Keane, who would later become United captain, said Eric taught him what it meant to be a winner. That before Eric, United players hoped they would win. After Eric, they expected to win. Between 1992 and 1995, Eric played 143 games for Manchester United. He scored 64 goals. He won 2 league titles, 1 FA Cup. He was named Player of the Year. He was the King of Manchester. Everyone loved him. Everyone wanted to be him. But then, on January 25th, 1995, everything changed. It was January 25th, 1995. Manchester United were playing away at Crystal Palace. The game was at Selhurst Park, a small stadium in South London. United were top of the league. They were expected to win easily. Palace was struggling. They were near the bottom of the table. The game started badly for United. Palace were physical, aggressive. They fouled Eric repeatedly. The referee did nothing. Eric got frustrated. In the 48th minute, Eric was running toward the Palace goal. A Palace defender, Richard Shaw, pulled Eric's shirt. Eric turned around. He kicked Shaw in the chest. The referee ran over. Red card. Eric walked toward the tunnel, slowly, head down. The Palace fans booed him. They screamed at him. They called him names. One fan sitting near the front stood up. His name was Matthew Simmons. He was 20 years old. He had been drinking. He ran down the stairs toward the advertising boards. He leaned over the barrier. He screamed at Eric. He called him French scum. He told him to go back to France. He made a gesture, a V sign. Eric stopped walking. He looked at Simmons. For a moment he did nothing. He just stared. The stadium was loud, but Eric didn't hear anything. He just saw Simmons, screaming, pointing, mocking. Then Eric ran. He ran toward the crowd. He jumped over the advertising board. He kicked Simmons in the chest with both feet, a kung fu kick. Simmons fell backwards. Eric landed on top of him. He punched him. Once. Twice. Security guards ran over. They grabbed Eric. They pulled him away. Simmons was on the ground, holding his chest, stunned. The crowd was in shock. The players were in shock. The United coaching staff ran onto the pitch. They couldn't believe what had just happened. Eric was dragged into the tunnel. He didn't resist. He didn't say anything. He just walked. The media exploded. The next morning, every newspaper in England had the same headline: Eric's Kung Fu kick. The photo of him in midair, feet extended, hitting Simmons in the chest. It was on the front page, not the back page, the front page. Politicians called for Eric to be deported. Newspapers called him a thug, a disgrace, a danger to society. The FA charged Eric with bringing the game into disrepute. They banned him for the rest of the season. 9 months. Manchester United fined him £20,000, 2 weeks' wages. The police charged him with assault. Eric was summoned to Croydon Magistrates Court. On March 23, 1995, Eric appeared in court. The courtroom was packed. Journalists from around the world. Cameras outside. Eric walked in wearing a suit. He sat down. He didn't say anything. His lawyer spoke for him. He said Eric had been provoked, that Simmons had used racist language, that Eric had reacted in the heat of the moment. The judge asked Eric if he had anything to say. Eric stood up. He looked at the judge. He spoke one sentence, in English. With a thick French accent, he said, "When the seagulls follow the trawler, it is because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea." The courtroom went silent. Nobody understood what he meant. The judge looked confused. He asked Eric to explain. Eric said nothing. He sat down. His lawyer said Eric had no further comment. The judge shook his head. He sentenced Eric to 2 weeks in prison. Eric's lawyer appealed. The sentence was reduced to 120 hours of community service. Eric was 28 years old. His career was in ruins. The media said he would never play for Manchester United again, that Ferguson would sell him, that no club in England would want him. Eric went home. He didn't speak to anyone. He just waited. Eric could have left England. He could have gone back to France. He could have retired. But he didn't. He stayed in Manchester. He trained every day, alone, in a small gym near his house. He ran. He lifted weights. He practiced free kicks in an empty park. He didn't speak to the media. He didn't give interviews. He just trained. Alex Ferguson stood by him. Ferguson told the press that Eric was still a Manchester United player, that he would play again, that he would come back stronger. Some people thought Ferguson was crazy, that he was risking his career for a player who had assaulted a fan. But Ferguson didn't care. He believed in Eric. He knew Eric was different. He knew Eric would come back. Eric's ban ended on October 1st, 1995. His first game back was against Liverpool at Old Trafford. It was October 15th, 1995. 72,000 people packed into the stadium. Everyone wanted to see Eric. The atmosphere was electric. When Eric's name was announced, the crowd erupted. They chanted his name for 5 minutes. Eric the King, Eric the King. Eric walked onto the pitch. He didn't wave, he didn't smile. He just looked at the crowd. Then he looked at the Liverpool players. He was ready. The game kicked off. United dominated. In the 71st minute, United won a penalty. Eric took it. He placed the ball on the spot. He walked back. He ran up. He hit it. Bottom corner, goal. The crowd exploded. Eric didn't celebrate. He just stood there, arms folded, chest out, like nothing had happened, like he had never been away. The match ended 2-2. Eric had scored and created an assist. Eric was back. That season, United won the league. Eric was named captain. He scored 14 goals in 30 games. He was voted PFA Player of the Year. The fans loved him more than ever. They sang songs about him. They made murals. They wrote books. Eric had gone from disgrace to hero in one season. The next season, 1996-97, United won the league again. Eric scored 11 goals. He was 30 years old. He was at the peak of his career. He lifted the Premier League trophy at Old Trafford in May 1997. The fans chanted his name. The players lifted him on their shoulders. Eric had done it. He had redeemed himself. He had proven everyone wrong. In May 1997, Manchester United were champions of England for the 4th time in 5 years. Eric was captain. He was a legend. He was 30 years old. Everyone assumed he would play for at least 2 more years, maybe 3, maybe 4. But then, on May 18th, 1997, Eric called a press conference. The room was full. Journalists from every newspaper in England, cameras from every TV station. Alex Ferguson sat next to Eric. Ferguson looked nervous. He didn't know what Eric was going to say. Nobody did. Eric spoke for 2 minutes. He said he had decided to retire from professional football. that he had achieved everything he wanted to achieve, that he had nothing left to prove, that it was time to do something else. The room went silent. Nobody could believe it. Ferguson looked shocked. He tried to convince Eric to stay, but Eric shook his head. He said his mind was made up. Eric played his last game on May 11th, 1997. It was a league game against West Ham United at Upton Park. United were already champions. The title was won. Eric played 90 minutes. He didn't score, he didn't need to. United won 2-0. The West Ham fans applauded him. They knew they were watching history. When the final whistle blew, Eric walked off the pitch. He didn't wave to the crowd. He didn't look back. He just walked into the tunnel. Eric Cantona played 5 seasons for Manchester United. He played 185 games. He scored 82 goals. He won 4 league titles, 2 FA Cups, 2 Charity Shields. He was voted PFA Player of the Year twice. He was named in the PFA Team of the Year 5 times. But his impact was bigger than trophies. Eric changed Manchester United. Before Eric, United were a talented team that often fell short. After Eric, they were a dynasty. They won 13 league titles in 21 years. They won the Champions League. They became the biggest club in the world. Alex Ferguson said Eric was the greatest signing he ever made, that Eric taught United how to win. Eric left football in 1997. He moved to France. He became an actor. He appeared in French films. He did commercials. He gave strange interviews. He talked about philosophy, about art, about life. He never managed a football team. He never coached. He never came back to football as a professional. He didn't need to. He had already done what he came to do. In 2001, Eric was voted the greatest Manchester United player of all time by the fans, above George Best, above Bobby Charlton, above Ryan Giggs. The fans never forgot him. They still sing songs about him. They still wear his shirt. They still tell stories about the kung fu kick, about the collar, about the arrogance, about the genius. Today, when people talk about the 1990s, they talk about Eric Cantona, the Frenchman who became English, the difficult boy who became a king, the player who kicked a fan and came back to win the league, the man who retired at 30 and never looked back. Eric Cantona was not perfect. He was difficult, he was arrogant, he was temperamental, but he was also brilliant. He was a winner, he was a leader. He changed Manchester United, he changed English football, and for 5 years he was the best player in the country. They called him King Eric, and for 5 years he was.